Most women are taught to speak softly, to apologize when they take up space, to explain themselves into exhaustion. But the woman who walks away in silence? She does something far more unsettling. She deprives the world of her light without warning, and in that absence, she commands a power few understand. Not through rage. Not through threats. But through the terrifying echo of nothingness. Because silence, in its purest form, is not emptiness. It is presence intensified. It is the storm after the collapse, the final truth after every lie is run dry. And when a woman chooses it, it means something has broken, not in her, but in the illusion you projected onto her. Carl Jung taught us that every relationship is, at its core, a dialogue between shadows. Two unconscious minds trying desperately to find in the other what they've long disowned in themselves. And when a man meets a woman who is not merely pretty, nor simply kind, but aware of her worth, her pain, her patterns, he does not meet just a woman. He meets a mirror. One that reflects not just his desires, but his inadequacies, his wounds, his helpless need for her validation. That is why her silence cuts deeper than any insult. Because it doesn't just say, "You hurt me." It says, "You are no longer relevant to my healing." And yet, so many men only realize her worth in her absence. They circle back, years later sometimes, begging for closure. But they don't want closure. They want resurrection. They want her voice again to make them feel whole. They crave the chaos they once dismissed as too much. The irony burns, what once irritated them now defines their hunger. But the woman who walks away in silence has seen behind the curtain. She has stepped beyond the archetype of the pleaser, the fixer, the woman who waits. And once she sees the game, she cannot unsee it. There comes a moment, a quiet, private one, when she stops explaining herself mid-sentence. Stops rereading texts. Stops softening her no into maybe. She does not announce it. There is no dramatic speech. Just an internal switch, enough. That is the true beginning of her individuation. And in Jungian terms, individuation is not a luxury. It is a soul's necessity. When she walks away, she doesn't do it to punish. She does it because she can no longer betray herself. She has housed too many ghosts for too long, ghosts of old lovers, of childhood wounds, of fathers who never showed up, of friends who loved her only when she was small enough to control. She has spoken in rooms where no one heard her. Now she has become the room itself, and silence is her sanctuary. Can you feel it? That pause between what was and what will never be again. That is where her power lives. Because when a woman detaches with dignity, when she steps back without venom, when she lets go without needing to be understood, she becomes a figure larger than the story you put her in. She becomes myth. And myth cannot be argued with. You may not understand her. But you will remember her. This is not about playing games or winning a breakup. This is about spiritual maturity. When a woman chooses silence, she is not being passive. She is transcending the need to perform. She has chosen to stop bleeding for those who never learned how to hold a wound. And that is not weakness, it is sacred self-protection. You see, the psyche has thresholds. Jung spoke of this, how the soul will create symptoms, sabotage, even sickness, to alert us when our integrity has been compromised. And a woman who has ignored these signs for too long, who has sacrificed her voice for the sake of attachment, will one day wake up and feel a pain so deep it becomes a prayer. And in that prayer, she will not ask for love. She will ask for clarity. She will ask to see the truth of a connection no matter how much it hurts. And when the veil lifts, when she sees the narcissistic cycles, the emotional avoidance, the games dressed up as passion, she will not scream. She will simply leave. And the silence that follows? It will echo in places you didn't know had ears. You'll notice it in the smallest things at first, the way her name no longer lingers in your mouth, the way her scent vanishes from your clothes like a memory refusing to be remembered. But the real loss is something far more devastating. It is the collapse of the mirror. That sacred reflective space where your ego used to feel important, desired, needed. Because a woman's presence is not neutral. When she loves, she pours life into the lifeless. She fills the cracks you never noticed. She gives meaning to your silence, weight to your words, forgiveness to your flaws. But when she walks away without a word, she takes all of that energy with her. And for the first time, you're left to meet yourself, not the version of you she reflected back, but the you beneath the illusion. This is the karmic gravity of her absence. In Jungian terms, what you projected onto her, your anima, your inner feminine, has withdrawn. She was your muse, your fantasy, the soft place you fell into to escape your own inadequacy. But projection is a fragile contract. It demands unconsciousness to thrive. And the moment she stepped into consciousness, the mirror shattered. She stopped being your dream and became her own reality. This is the archetype of the sovereign woman, rising from the ashes of relational trauma. She does not rage against you. She does not curse you. She does not compete with the woman who comes after her. Because she knows none of them will feel like her. Not because she was more beautiful, more generous, more passionate. But because she was true. She was raw in ways that terrified you. She showed you your power and your weakness in the same breath. And when you didn't know what to do with that intensity, you confused it with drama. You mistook her boundaries for rejection. Her self-respect for distance. Her tears for manipulation. And so you pushed her away. But when she left, she didn't slam the door. She let it close behind her like a chapter finished by fate. That's the part that haunts you, the lack of spectacle. The refusal to perform pain for your comfort. She gave you nothing to hold on to. And nothing is the heaviest thing to carry. Now the silence grows roots. It stretches through the empty rituals of your life, the messages left unread, the women you touch without feeling, the music that once reminded you of her now reminding you only of what you lost in yourself. Because this was never about her alone. It was about what she awakened. What she mirrored back. What she offered you that you weren't ready to receive. And you watch from the outside now, as she rebuilds in private. No breadcrumbs. No updates. No signals for rescue. Just a steady becoming. Because while you scrambled to replace her, she met her shadow. She went into the deep forest of her soul, where all women go when they have been gaslit one too many times. She sat with her rage. With the parts of herself she once softened to be more palatable. She gave them names. Gave them voice. And in doing so, she integrated. Do you understand what that means? She didn't just move on. She evolved. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this woman? She stopped calling pain her fate. She made the unconscious conscious. She reclaimed every part of herself you asked her to suppress. And now, she is no longer the version of her you once knew. She doesn't need revenge. She doesn't need closure. She doesn't need you to understand why she left. Because the truth is, her silence was never about you. It was about the reclamation of her own voice, the one she once drowned in your comfort, your chaos, your conditional affection. She stopped seeking softness from those who only offered it in exchange for submission. She stopped asking to be seen. Because now she sees herself. And in that quiet seeing, there is no room for the noise of past entanglements. So if you ever hear her laugh again in the distance, don't chase it. That sound no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the woman who survived the death of herself and chose to live anyway. There is a sacred transformation that happens when a woman stops fighting to be understood. When she no longer bargains her soul for validation. When she finally realizes that closure is not given by the one who broke her, it is claimed by the one who rises from the wreckage. You see, the silence she chose was not weakness. It was an initiation. Into a darker kind of wisdom. The kind that doesn't flinch in the face of abandonment. The kind that no longer feeds on apologies that arrive too late. She tasted her loneliness. She drank it like a bitter tea. And in that stillness, she met the ghost of every version of herself she once silenced to be loved. The little girl who clung to emotionally unavailable men, thinking that if she could just be good enough, they'd stay. The nurturer who thought fixing broken people would make her feel whole. The siren who performed femininity like a mask, hoping beauty would shield her from betrayal. One by one, she buried them. And what rose in their place was a woman forged in fire, not fantasy. This is not the woman who asks, "Why wasn't I enough for him?" No. This is the woman who asks, "Why did I make myself small enough to fit inside his wounds?" She has stepped outside the myth of romantic redemption. She no longer believes she can love someone into wholeness. She no longer believes her empathy is a currency to trade for scraps of affection. And because of that, she becomes terrifying to the kind of man who depends on her self-abandonment. Because he cannot control her anymore. He cannot use silence as punishment when hers is deeper, more eternal, more final. He cannot bait her with hot and cold affection because she no longer lives in the climate of his approval. He cannot impress her with borrowed depth, because she's seen what real inner work looks like, and it is not poetic words. It is accountability. It is humility. It is showing up, day after day, even when it's uncomfortable. She no longer falls for intensity that isn't backed by integrity. This woman, this force, she has become untouchable. Not because she is cold, but because she is clear. Clear about her worth. Clear about her boundaries. Clear about the difference between love and dependency. Between chemistry and trauma bonding. Between longing and true connection. And when she walks past you in silence, unapologetic, radiant, unavailable, you will feel it in your chest like a door closing inside your own soul. It will not be rage you feel. It will be absence. The absence of the light you once took for granted. The absence of the compassion you mistook for obligation. The absence of the woman who once waited by the phone, checked her tone, blamed herself for your distance. She no longer waits. She no longer explains. She no longer makes excuses for your inability to show up. And in this silence, you will hear something ancient. Something primal. Something every man knows deep in his bones but rarely admits. When a woman walks away in silence, it is not because she gave up. It is because she woke up. Jung would say this is the moment she stops operating from her complex, the wound, the story, the compulsive need to repeat the past, and begins to live from herself. The capital S self. The divine center. The unshakable inner core that does not beg, does not plead, does not perform. She does not need love. She chooses it. And that is why she terrifies you now. Because you realize, too late, that she was never trying to be your everything. She was trying to be her whole self. And you mistook that for threat, not gift. Now she belongs to no one. Not because she's hardened, but because she's healed. She learned that true power isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream to be seen. It whispers through the choices no one sees, what she no longer tolerates, what she no longer reaches for, what she no longer explains away. She has returned to herself. And that return is sacred. It cannot be undone. Not even by your apology. Because the woman who walks away in silence has already made peace with the parts of you she once longed for. She buried the illusion of you beside the woman she used to be. And now, she no longer walks to be found. She walks to be free. Freedom, you see, is not something given. It is something remembered. And when a woman remembers who she was before she twisted herself into shapes for approval, before she sacrificed her intuition to keep the peace, before she mistook attention for affection, there is no force on earth that can make her return to captivity. She becomes like the forest, untamed, ancient, alive in every season. She no longer performs softness to be chosen. She is softness, yes, but on her terms. When she chooses to offer it, it is sacred. When she withholds it, it is sacred. Her very absence becomes holy ground. What was once insecurity has transmuted into discernment. What was once self-doubt has become quiet, thunderous knowing. She doesn't argue anymore. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she no longer needs her pain to be seen in order to be valid. She doesn't need to win the story. She doesn't need to be right. Her worth is no longer tethered to being understood. That is the dark power of a woman who walks away in silence. Because it forces others to confront what her presence protected them from. She was the balm, the emotional translator, the buffer between your chaos and your consequence. And when she leaves, that buffer disappears. The emotional bill arrives. And if you are not ready to pay it, you will call her cold. You will call her dramatic. You will tell yourself that she never cared. But deep down, beneath your denial, you'll know the truth: she cared so much she almost lost herself. And then, in one breathless moment of clarity, she decided never again. It wasn't the fight that broke her. It was the repetition. The repeated betrayals disguised as misunderstandings. The chronic amnesia when it came to her needs. The cycle of hurt followed by honeymoon, apology followed by relapse. She saw it for what it was: a loop, not a life. A performance, not a partnership. And so she exited. Not because she didn't love you, but because she finally loved herself more. She held her inner child in her arms and whispered, "We're not waiting for someone to come back this time. We're walking ourselves home." And home was never a person. Home was the version of herself that doesn't shrink to be safe. The one who doesn't say it's fine when it's not. The one who doesn't abandon her intuition just to avoid confrontation. That woman had been buried under layers of compromise, of silence, of emotional labor that was never reciprocated. But now, she has risen. And the world does not know what to do with a woman like that. A woman who no longer fears loneliness, because she's met herself in the deepest dark and found a light that no relationship ever gave her. A woman who no longer attaches to potential, because she knows what actualization looks like and won't settle for less. She is not bitter. She is not closed. She is clear. And clarity is a kind of power that doesn't seek revenge. It simply moves on. Without announcement. Without fireworks. Without permission. You may see her again. At a distance. Maybe in passing. Maybe in your dreams. But you will not reach her. Because she has outgrown the version of herself that needed to be reached. This is what it means to integrate. To walk the labyrinth of your own psyche and come out not with answers, but with sovereignty. Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. And she has done just that. She has integrated her shadow, the rage, the grief, the fear, the desperation, and made it holy. No longer ashamed of her tears. No longer guilty for her anger. No longer apologetic for her desire to be met, not managed. She has learned the quiet strength of emotional detachment. Not numbness. Not avoidance. But the sacred detachment that says, you are free to go. I am free to stay gone. And perhaps the most terrifying truth of all? She does not hate you. She simply no longer needs you. And there is no power greater than that. Somewhere along the spiral of her healing, the woman who once pleaded to be heard realizes, not everyone deserves access to her truth. Some hearts are not containers but colanders incapable of holding what is sacred. And so she no longer pours. The woman who walks away in silence learns that not all wounds are meant to be witnessed. Some are to be transmuted in private. In the cathedral of her own becoming. With no applause. With no validation. Only the whisper of her own soul saying, keep going. And she does. This woman, she no longer explains her silence. Because those who demanded explanation never truly listened. They heard words, but not meaning. They heard noise, but not her. Now, she offers none of it. Because silence is the boundary that cannot be debated. It cannot be twisted. It cannot be gaslit. It just is. And it is terrifying. To those who relied on her emotional labor. To those who fed off her forgiveness like a drug. To those who mistook her compassion for weakness and her patience for permission. Now, when they reach for her, they find not bitterness, but a void. An unbridgeable distance. A door that was never slammed, only closed and locked from the inside. This is where the power lives. Not in revenge. Not in proving a point. But in removal. Because she understands now, peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the absence of self-betrayal. She no longer enters rooms where she must shrink. No longer entertains conversations that turn her truth into inconvenience. No longer negotiates with people who only love her conditionally. She does not punish. She simply does not participate. And in this refusal, there is a spiritual violence more profound than any scream. Because she's done screaming. She screamed in her silence, in her people-pleasing, in her breakdowns behind closed doors. She screamed every time she made herself less to be more palatable. But now, the scream has turned into something else, something deeper. It's become discernment. And discernment doesn't announce itself. It simply doesn't reply. The men she once attracted, those drawn to her light only to dim it, no longer recognize her. Because she is no longer available to be fixed, rescued, or redeemed. She is not the girl waiting to be chosen. She is the woman who chooses. This is not detachment from love. It is detachment from illusion. And that distinction is everything. She still loves. Oh, how she loves. But not from a place of lack. Not from a place of please see me. She loves from overflow now. And only those who can match that frequency, who have done the shadow work, faced their demons, and held their own wounds without bleeding on her, only they may enter. Everyone else? She blesses them from afar and keeps walking. There is something primal about this kind of woman. Something that stirs discomfort in those who've never faced their own reflection. She is not angry. She is awake. And awakening women do not beg for understanding. They become understanding. And yes, she will still feel the ache some nights. Healing is not a straight line. There will be moments where the silence feels like loss. But she does not run from those moments anymore. She sits with them. And in doing so, she turns ache into art, grief into gold, and endings into thresholds. She no longer fears solitude. Because in solitude, she remembered her name. The name she had before the world taught her to doubt herself. The name whispered by the soul before it was covered in noise and guilt and conditioning. And that name, it is holy. It is hers. So if you cross paths with her now, don't mistake her calm for passivity. Don't mistake her boundaries for walls. Don't mistake her silence for a void waiting to be filled. It is not emptiness. It is essence. She is no longer interested in potential. She wants presence. No longer impressed by apologies. She wants accountability. No longer swayed by chemistry. She wants capacity. Because now, she is not looking for a man to carry her. She is looking for a man who can stand beside her. And if none appear, she will still walk on. Silent. Sovereign. Unshaken. There is something unearthly about the woman who has walked herself through fire and chosen to emerge whole. Not polished. Not perfect. But whole. She is not a goddess because she is adored, she is a goddess because she no longer seeks worship. She simply is. And that being, that radiant self-acceptance, is the final stage of her liberation. She does not rush anymore. Not into arms. Not into answers. Not into the illusion of safety dressed up as love. Because she knows that anything built on urgency, on desperation, on the aching hunger to be completed, is a lie waiting to collapse. She has tasted the silence. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of sovereignty. That's what makes her dangerous now, not in the way of harm, but in the way of truth. She doesn't flatter. She doesn't pacify. She doesn't contort herself to be digestible. And yet, in her presence, you feel compelled to be more. To rise. To shed your masks. Because her authenticity is disarming. Her clarity blinding. There is no chaos in her anymore. Only depth. No hunger in her eyes. Only discernment. No reaching in her hands. Only the stillness of someone who knows she holds everything already. This is the power Jung spoke of, not the persona, not the facade, but the self that emerges once the shadow has been embraced and the illusions burned to ash. She has made peace with her darkness. And that peace has become her compass. She walks with death now, the death of her old selves, the death of her delusions, the death of every dream that depended on someone else to fulfill it. She walks with death, not as a mourner, but as a priestess. Because she knows that endings are not the opposite of life. They are the doorway to rebirth. And she, reborn from silence, has become untouchable by the petty gravity of those who once kept her small. Now, when someone asks for her energy, she doesn't ask, "Do they love me?" She asks, "Are they aligned with my peace?" If not, she smiles and walks on. Not to prove anything. Not to punish anyone. But because the woman she has become can no longer breathe in the spaces she used to beg to be allowed into. Her silence taught her that she is the sanctuary. She is the temple. She is the threshold and the flame and the guardian of her own becoming. And she no longer needs closure. Because some doors are not meant to be closed with words. Some doors are closed by walking away and never turning back. So if you see her again glowing, graceful, grounded, don't ask her to remember who she was with you. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone who walks not to escape, but to arrive. And she has arrived. In herself. For herself. As herself. She does not seek revenge. She seeks alignment. She does not crave validation. She moves in truth. She does not fear being alone. She cherishes the company of her own soul. And should love come again, it will not find her waiting. It will find her walking. And only if it can keep pace with her, only if it brings peace instead of promises, will she pause. But until then, she walks. Silent. Unbothered. Unbound. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.